Yes, on today's episode of the program Environment and You on Independent Television, Abuja, I am your host, Catherine EYEMESE. The program Environment and You is where we discuss environmental issues, thereby preferring solutions to some of those issues through experts' discussion on the program. And today is not going to be anything different. And like I said, I am your host, Catherine EYEMESE, and the topic of discussion today shall be the role of legislation in advancing action on climate change. The historic and perhaps primary role of the government is to pass the laws of a nation, and that of environmental matters is inclusive as well. And lawmaking is also on climate change is perceived to be complex and difficult, but we shall get to know more of that on the program today. And I have with me a guest who shall be doing justice to the topic of discussion that says the role of legislation in advancing actions on climate change. He is in the person of Nemeka Oru, and also he is the National Coordinator, Global Legislators Organization for a Balanced Environment. Like you hear me say, balanced environment. It is very crucial that the environment is very balanced for us all, both humans, animals, to live in. And like I said, I welcome you to the program today.
Thank you very much.
All right, the topic of discussion, like we said, is climate change. Yes. And the role of government in ensuring a balanced environment for us all to live in. Now, talking about climate change, before we go into the program proper, can you give us an insight to what the world, I mean that cliche, climate change is?
Okay, thank you very much. Over time, I've heard there has been this mistake where people try to equate, say, climate change the same thing as global warming. Okay. They are completely two different things. Global warming is for a short term. Change in temperature for within a short period of time, but for climate change is a change in weather patterns over a long period of time. So I'll give an instance. In Nigeria, for instance, we used to have specific months when we know as the rainy season and then the dry season. Over time, we've started noticing that there have been changes to this. So what we knew when I was growing up as the primary or the months that are called rainy season months are no longer what we have now. So these are due to the impacts of climate change. Of course, there are quite a whole lot of things that are come across because of climate change. You got the erosion, the flooding that we witness. Is tied primarily to climate change. But perhaps as we talk more, I would get.
Okay, from what you said so far, you said that there is difference between global warming and climate change. Yes. Now, the common relationship between these two is what?
It's there will be changes in temperature, but for climate change, it must not definitely be about temperature rising, and that also. But for global warming, it's just the Earth's surface, that is affected. It's not the totality of the Earth, which could include the water bodies. It could include the atmosphere. It could include the ground, where you now start seeing instances of desertification. So it's more detailed. Okay. The other one is just increase in or change in temperature on the surface of the Earth. Okay,
that is the
global warming
and the rainy season.
Dry season. The change in dry season over time is not because of global warming. It's because of climate change. Okay. Because this is more in depth, something that has taken years to happen. And then as it happens, you may not notice the change immediately, but gradually, it starts becoming obvious. For instance, in where I'm from, in Abia State, Nigeria, we have a preponderance of what we call gully erosions there. Okay, yes. So when I was growing up, it wasn't really that way. So when we visit the village, it wasn't just that way. But you could see now that those that menace has become exacerbated over time. So this is just the difference, because climate change it creeps up on you, gradually, and that's why you've been having several global conversations on the fact that we need to start now to plug it. Because now, let me create this picture. Most of the conversations on the reason why we have to take action now, is projected at what would happen in 2100. We are in 2023. It's because scientists are looking at the impacts that the continuous increase in temperature you know, could the impacts on the environment, you know, over time, and then the catastrophic effects so many years from now, which is why you keep hearing the 2030 target. You know, we have to cut it down, ensure that the average increase in temperature rise does not exceed a certain amount, like 1.5 degrees, you know, does not exceed it between now and 2030. Otherwise, we'll get to the point where we will never reverse it. Okay, for global warming, it would have been different.
All right. There is global action to combat climate change.
Yes.
How is Nigeria aligning with those actions?
Yeah, thank you. Nigeria has always been quick to, you know, be a signatory to most of these international treaties, you know, and I've heard people say sometimes that, you know, our problem has never been that of becoming signatories to international treaties. It's always been with trying to implement them. And I will speak broadly a little bit, you know, to the 3 real conventions, you know, before, because climate change is just the one that the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change is all about. Then we have the one for biological diversity, and then we have the one for combating desertification. Okay. Now, these 3 real conventions, Nigeria is a signatory to 3 of them. You know, in fact, as recent as 7th to 19th of December last year in Montreal, Canada, you know, Nigeria was also a signatory to the post-2020 global biodiversity framework, you know, which has 23 targets and 4 goals. Nigeria has already keyed into that. Nigeria is a signatory to the Paris Agreement on Climate Change. In fact, that was, I think, on 22nd of September 2016 was when President Muhammad Buhari signed, made Nigeria a signatory to that, signed the Paris Agreement. Then we are also part of the United Nations Framework for combating desertification. Now, to really bring these things down home, you know, people expect that to domesticate these things probably means having a particular law that lifts these things wholesale and then brings them and becomes a new law in Nigeria. But that's not really how Nigeria has been doing it. And of course, Nigeria does not really need to do it in any particular way. So you could see that, for instance, when President Muhammad Buhari signed into law the Climate Change Act on 17th November 2021, that was the climate, people could say that that is the Paris Agreement on Climate Change being domesticated in Nigeria. But before then, Nigeria had already shown that as a country, we had domesticated this thing, you know, because we had already committed to our NDCs as national determined contributions, and we submitted the first one, we submitted the second one in 2021, you know, and then we've made so many commitments that we were pushing. But what we need there was a legal framework to actually give legal backing to these things, and that was what the Climate Change Act has done for us. And when it comes to the Convention on Combating Desertification, you know, as we all probably know, the Pan-African, Pan-African program, you know, the Great Green Wall Initiative, you know, which seeks to restore about 8,000 kilometers of arid land. You know, in Nigeria, we have about 11 states that are part of that Great Green Wall belt. You know, so this is Nigeria's commitment towards combating desertification and restoring degraded lands, which is part of the goals of the United Nations Framework, United Nations Convention on Combating Desertification. You know, and of course, in 2015, we set up the National Agency for the Great Green Wall, which has been doing incredible work anyway. You know, of course, we have our limitations. Yes. You know, and I would like to say, okay, in terms of biodiversity, too, we've been doing quite a lot. You know, you could see that Nigeria has national parks. You know, these are efforts towards preserving our biodiversity. It's, like I said at the beginning, it's not definitely enough, but these are practical steps taken by the country to be able to address, you know, these issues. Now, if you recall that NESRA, we have in NESRA, that's the National Environmental Standards list that regulates everything concerning the environment. Yes. You know, so they are supposed to be like the watchdog that would look at where things are not being done properly, and probably, you know, they are like the police, the environmental police, you know, basically, you know. I regret that, of course, like I said, we are not getting everything right. I don't see NESRA doing, being proactive enough. And that's why I'm happy with the Climate Change Act, because Climate Change Act specifically gives power to the National Council on Climate Change and its secretariat to be able to call for review. What exactly are you doing? This is your mandate when it comes to monitoring actions that impact the environment. What exactly are you doing to ensure that this person is not doing what this person is doing that is wrong, and the person is penalized for it, which is the job of NESRA.
Okay, I was going to that because like you know, there are a lot of activities in our country, in our environment that causes pollution everywhere, and there should be laws concerning this. The laws are supposed to be put in place to sanction those people that that are responsible for this environmental degradation. Would you now say that Nigeria as a country, there are laws concerning this?
The Climate Change Act 2021, I'm privileged to be part of the people who drafted it, makes explicit provisions on what it calls the responsibilities of both public and private entities, when it comes to preserving our environment, So, and when there is a violation, there are specific fines which will be determined by the National Council on Climate Change, and then the enforcement agency becomes NESRA, which has been empowered by law, to do this. Now, let me also say again that you must not have laws, specifically prohibiting certain things. Policies can be enforced. Okay. So, for instance, yesterday, the Minister of Environment announced that they had set up the generator and vehicular emissions control program, with NESRA being the watchdog again, for this. Part of the things they are going to do is to sensitize the people on the dangers of using generators or vehicles that impact on the environment. In fact, the health implications and then the implications on the environment generally. I didn't see the teeth in it, in terms of this will be the fine if you do not adhere to such thing. And that's where the legislation could come in, where since the Climate Change Act had already made a provision saying that people should adhere to blah 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 thing, that
should be sanctioned.
Yes. So it now behoves on the National Council on Climate Change or its secretariat, headed by the Director General, to understand properly the texts of that act, and then begin to say, NESRA, please, we need your report on blah blah blah. What have you done about so thing? And then they will take it, of course, to the president and say, this is where these people are. Then give direct instructions. Do it better this way, and then this will be the implication if these people do not conform, to so thing. So that's another way that you can. Another way, of course, is to have a law that explicitly says don't do this. But I think that the difference between laws and policies is the fact that policies can be changed, midway. I could come in as a president and I do not like a certain policies, I decide to change it. But if you say law, you have to go through the rigorous process of trying to amend it, which would go through first reading in the House of Reps, second reading, third reading, before it's taken. Then when it's done, then it will then be sent to the Senate for concurrence, and it goes through the same process before it's now sent to the president. So a long process, to do that. And the reason why I say this is because 2 days ago, I had this announcement by the Minister of Environment, lifting the ban, the conditional ban on the export of charcoal and processed wood. Within the climate change community, we see this like, what exactly do you mean by that? Because already we are complaining that Nigeria's forest is being depleted. So why are we lifting ban on charcoal production and export of charcoal and export of processed woods? These are the things we should be trying to protect.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Nemeka, for that insight there. It's been the program Environment and You on Independent Television Abuja, and we've been discussing a crucial topic that says the role of legislation in advancing action on climate change. Like you all know, the issue of climate change has become a very crucial case, menace in not only in Nigeria but as in the world at large. Now, moving forward, would you say do we have any case of enforcement against perpetrators of environment? Because when there is you say no laws, but also but it is policies. So people that goes against these policies, they should be sanctioned. Before now, have there been record of sanctions on perpetrators of this environmental pollution?
Yeah, I have no record of anything like that happened. Because like I said, you don't really sanction or ask take people to court based on policies. You know, there has to be a legal, what's it called, a legal leg for you to stand on.
But if there is no sanction, how do we intend to make people, especially in this part of the world that we are from, it is either you make them do the right thing by force, or they don't try to do it at all. Now, I believe there should be sanction for offenders,
yes,
to as a deterrent to others, and that will make them do the right thing, even if it is not convenient for them.
Yes, and that's where, again, like I said earlier on, that's where the Climate Change Act, you know, which was signed into law 2021, comes into play. You know, if whoever is in charge of the Secretariat of the National Council on Climate Change understands properly the text of that act, you know, the person can actually run with it and be able to ensure that sanctions are enforced. There are provisions, you know, for penalties for going against certain things. They are all provided for in the Climate Change Act. You know, so it's all there, and then you can use NESRA to enforce, since it's the authority backed by law to enforce all of these things. You know,
okay, going forward, Nigeria, like you said in your previous answer to my questions, you said Nigeria has been signatory to so many environmental conventions. It is not also enough to just be a signatory. Now, what you've gone there to do, the take home assignment, have they been able to carry this out? How would you assess, like, putting into practice whatever is being discussed at these conventions?
Okay, thank you. There have been instances of Nigeria taking action. You know, like I said, if you are talking about the Convention on Biological Diversity, Nigeria came back and Nigeria set up national parks. You know, the Yankari Game Reserve. You know, so many of these things. You know, they set them up. You know, then when Nigeria signed the Paris Agreement on Climate Change, we came back and then we started working on submitting our NDCs and then cutting down on some of these things. You know. When we, with the Convention on Combating Desertification, we have the Great Green Wall Initiative, you know, where we are trying to reclaim degraded lands. You know, we have the REP program that is also working against forest degradation and then deforestation proper. You know, so these programs are there. You know, and then in 2021, after President Muhammadu Buhari announced on the 2nd of November that Nigeria was going to attain net zero in 2060. You know, so he came back. When he came back, he signed into law the Climate Change Act, which made provisions for Nigeria to attain net zero legally. You know, provided a legal background, a legal backing to Nigeria attaining net zero between 2050 to 2070. You know, so every time Nigeria goes for anything and comes back, Nigeria does something very, very. Again, I was listening to the COP28 president designates Dr. Sultan Ajaba, and he was saying that for COP28, you know, the United Arab Emirates, they are doing quite a lot when it comes to renewable energy and all of that, you know. He was speaking during the Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week last week, and he made the comment that the UAE is committed to renewable energy production, and then they have already committed $50 billion. They commit additional $50 billion, you know, to this. Now, take note that Nigeria also recently launched, you know, late last year, we launched our energy transition plan, you know, which makes provisions for renewable energy. Okay. You know, so this is Nigeria trying to first address our energy poverty issue, but also ensure that in providing energy for industrialization, we do it in a clean way. So every time Nigeria has gone out there and come back, Nigeria has always taken a step, you know, in the right direction. Now, here is my problem, you know, and I believe I can speak freely. Our major problem has always been this, you know. We like to go around on one particular thing for a very long time. In fact, with the energy transition plan, of course, we've seen movements, you know, they've gone to the US to market it, seek for funding. First, it was the vice president that went, then when the president went for UNGA 76, you know, he also did the same thing. You know. So we've seen these movements, you know. Of course, kudos to President Muhammadu Buhari. He has always shown a whole lot of commitment to issues of climate change, you know. Prior to him coming on board, I've never seen any Nigerian president who had paid as much attention as he had paid to, you know, climate change. You know. Every time Nigeria goes there, we come back, we have all of these lofty ideas, and then we start doing them. You know. But as a practical person, what I think is our problem is that we do not strategically say step by step, okay, this is what we achieve between now and so time. We do that. we keep it aside. It becomes stepping stone to achieving objective 2. We do that, keep that aside. Objective 2 combined with objective 1 become stepping stone to addressing achieving objective 3. So we do it that way. So that's why we have always, gone forward and then we are back. The country commits.
There's no progress.
Yeah, there is progress, but very, like it's like progress that isn't really that much measurable, The Great Green Wall Initiative is a very lofty idea, beautiful idea, that could green the northern part of Nigeria, Then recently, in partnership with the World Bank, Nigeria has also set up the Akresa project. This one is for the entire northern nation, so it's all about addressing all of these issues again, So, but what I want to see is measurable progress, and not just progress that, like we achieve one in 10 years, and in 4 years or 5 years, then, we are going back. But again, the world is moving fast, and it seems to me that with the youth getting involved, in this conversation about climate change, the things that the government has to do, mounting pressure, awareness, especially through social media, that the country is beginning to do more. But a country that is this committed to achieving net zero knows very well that within a short time, we can no longer depend on our fossil fuel. So why are you sourcing for oil in other places? Exactly. See, like you do this and then you go back, and it's almost like, are you aware that you were the one who took this decision not too long ago? You were the one who signed to it.
All right, thank you. Time is no longer on our side, but before we wrap up the program for today, let's quickly tell us the way forward from the angle of residents, the public, because the issue of the environment is not the sole responsibility of the government alone. We all have to put our hands on deck to ensure a safer environment for everyone. Now, from the angle of the public and the government, what is the way forward? Okay,
first I will talk about the public before I come back to the government. For the public, one of the major problems we have is that of awareness. So I think that it behoves on people who are grounded on issues about environment, like what you are doing now, is continue to sensitize the people on it. Let the people know that when you use your plastic and dump them, anyhow, that, those things.
It's trouble for everyone.
It's trouble for everyone, and let them know that, when you indiscriminately burn bushes, all the emissions, they also affect you health-wise, and they would also affect your children in the years to come, And then for the public, when the people are well aware of all of this and properly grounded, they will now make those conversations part of the electoral currency, turn them to electoral currency, because if I know that the people who have voted for me are interested in how well I'm addressing issues of climate change or the environment, I will take it seriously, So that's why you see everybody campaigning. We'll be talking about security, the economy, light. But if you make the environment part of an electoral currency, people will talk about it, which brings me back to the government. It's not right that a government would not appoint ministers or people who head agencies that are passionate and qualified to hold those positions. Don't use these sensitive positions, especially positions that concern the environment, to compensate your political allies. It's not the right thing to do. It's important. Yes, it's important that you look at people who have the passion first, and the people who have the track record of having, ideas, that can turn to proper action, and then put them there. And that again comes back to the legislature, which my organization works with legislators principally. Brings us back to the fact that, again, for the legislature, when you are selecting the heads of your committee and then members of the environment and climate change and ecology committees, you select people who have backgrounds in environment or at least law. And then the person that will head it should be somebody who is passionate about these things, so that when these issues come up, through oversight, you can call NESRA. When NESRA comes for budget defense, or through normal when you go for oversight, you ask them, what exactly are you doing in ensuring that you enforce penalties to people who violate so policies or laws? So.
All right, thank you very much. We must appreciate you for being on the program today. The program has been Environment and You on Independent Television, and it has been Mr. Nemeka Oru, and he is the National Coordinator, Global Legislators Organization for a Balanced environment. And he has been doing justice to the topic of discussion, and I believe you must have learned one or two things from the episode of the program today. Next week is another day for another interesting package of the program, Environment and You. And until then, remember that cleanliness is next to godliness, and the issue of the environment is for us all, not for government alone. It is a responsibility of us all to ensure a cleaner and a safer environment for us all. I must thank you once again for being on the program. Join us again same time next week. I am your regular host, Kat.